Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Final Score. We took a brief hiatus to focus on education and our works and stuff, but we are fully committing back again, and we're going to start by giving you help with the fantasy lineups.
So starting off with primetime Thursday Night Football, we're going to have the Green Bay Packers take on the undefeated Arizona Cardinals. We're not going to try to be repetitive here and tell you to start Kyler Murray or Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones. Those are guys you know to start. Instead, we're going to give you outside-the-box plays and guys that you're going to want to look to start.
One defense I would sit is Arizona Cardinals, even though they are the number 2 ranked defense right now. Actually, number 1. I think that this is one of their first really good matchups, and if you have to start them, then it's not a big deal, but you would like to lean away from that, in my opinion, because the Packers are 6-1, and they're putting up an unbelievable offensive season.
And their defense, without some of their key guys like Jair Alexander, is still producing at a very high level. We saw Terry McLaurin kind of expose their defense the other day, but once again, that's without Jair, so obviously Hop is going to do that. But if you have guys like Christian Kirk or AJ Green, I'd personally veer on the opposite side. I'm not going to be starting second and third receivers like Rondale Moore, Kirk, and Green.
I agree. And even though I did say to sit Cardinals defense, I'm also going to say to start Allen Lazard.
Yep, that's a great start with Devontae just being added to the reserve/COVID list.
And even though he still has a chance of playing, I don't think he will. And so that would leave Allen Lazard as one of their
top options. Yeah. Also, Robert Tonyan. He's had a pretty rough season, just coming off his best game of the year. Plug him into your lineups. Rodgers is going to look his way. And when Rodgers locks onto his target for a game, he could even go for a hat trick with 3 touchdowns.
I agree. Moving on to the Cardinals side, I think start one of the running backs, whether it be James Conner or Chase Edmonds.
Both running backs have had very sneakily good production. James Conner has been much more touchdown dependent.
Yep.
And that's because Edmonds has still looking for his first touchdown of the season.
So I think if I'm going to start either, I'm going to go with the touchdown side. I'm going to start James Conner. When it comes to wide receivers, I'd stay away from most of their wide receivers. Obviously, we're not going to talk about their Hop because you're going to start him. But I would stay away from...
Definitely Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk has had 2 good weeks in a row. And I know sometimes we second guess ourselves here. Can he do 3 in a row? I don't. Christian Kirk is probably the 4th wide receiver in that offense. And with the addition of Zach Ertz, who is the guy, it's a no-brainer for you to start. You're not going to want to start your AJ Greens, Rondale Moore, Christian Kirk. The only offensive players should be James Conner and Zach Ertz, in my opinion. Obviously not talking about the obvious guys.
I agree. Moving on to the next game, we have 49ers and the Bears.
First game of our Sunday slate. We can start on the San Fran side. We're going to be looking. We saw Elijah Mitchell absolutely expose the Colts defense, which was pretty surprising because Colts are a strong defense due to their run defense, but Mitchell should be plugged into your lineup.
I don't think you can count last week against any wide receivers. Obviously, Debo did have a good week, but if you do have Niners wide receivers and they did bad last week, I don't think you can fault them too much because it was a pouring rain and wind. So the receivers didn't really do good, but Debo did end up doing well.
And Debo, if Debo's not in your lineup, I'm not really sure why, how you're managing your team because Debo's been a top 10 year in both PPR and non-PPR formats, so that's a no-brainer to plug him in. Mitchell against a solid Bears run defense. I'm plugging him in my lineup, and those are the only 2 players that I'm going to be seeing on the San Fran side. And 100% start 49ers D.
I agree. Moving to the Bears, I'm going to start Khalil Herbert. He's been pretty good, I think.
Absolutely.
With David Montgomery being out.
That does give me a little bit of side point. We see how effective running backs can be in this offensive line with the Bears. Trade for David Montgomery. He might be on the IR for 4 more weeks, only if you're in a position, if you're a 5-2 team, 4-3. I'm trading for David Montgomery right now because he's going to become huge for you playoff time.
I agree. And another player I'm going to sit this week is Allen Robinson.
Yeah, I'm sitting him every week.
Yeah,
this guy has been probably the number 1 fantasy disappointment.
I agree. I think
if you're starting any
and that
receiver,
could be Fields has had a lot of struggles. He had the first 5 turnover games since 2019. last week against the Bears or against the Buccaneers. So Field is struggling, and I think that does take away from Allen Robinson quite a bit.
I also do think, like Jaden said, the one guy you're going to be looking to start in your lineup is Khalil Herbert out of this game. If you're in a deeper league, a free wide receiver and a flex, you can look towards Darnell Mooney because he seems to be the guy that Fields has a connection with. I personally don't think he's going to do you much. But once again, if you're in a situation, you got guys on bye weeks, you got injuries, Mooney's not a bad play.
I agree. Moving on to the Bengals-Jets game. The Bengals...
No. I was just shaking my head because Jamar Chase is absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, Jamar Chase last week, 200 and a touchdown. He's been a top 5 receiver. Obviously, you're never going to bench him.
I'm throwing everyone into my lineup. I'm throwing Joe Mixon into my lineup.
Burrow.
Joe Burrow, 100% start. He's an absolute stud, and the league is finally starting to catch on.
The Patriots just scored 54 on them.
Exactly. With Brandon Bolden, J.J. Taylor, and Damian Harris probably getting 80 combined fantasy points. All running backs. So Samaje Perine is not a terrible play if you're in, like we said, one of these deeper leagues and you have injuries. He ran for a 50-yard touchdown. He's capable of breaking away a big play, so he might be a sneaky little play.
I definitely agree. Another player that I would potentially start is C.J. Uzomah.
Yeah, he's had 2 phenomenal games in a row. This whole offense, Burrow's almost looking like Kyler Murray, where he's just throwing darts to everybody.
The thing about starting CJ would be the risk, and that's because he has put up a lot of duds. But the way I view it, unless you have a tight end like Waller, Kelsey, it's just someone that's very good. The risk is tight ends are so bad that what C.J. Uzomah's been doing, he has 2 games with 95 yards and a touchdown. So that's worth the risk, and especially with
100%.
Especially against the Jets with how many people are going to get the ball. I think the Bengals offense as a whole is going to be, you're going to want to start almost everybody.
And I think if you look to the flip side, you're not going to want to start anyone except maybe Corey Davis is the only viable starter, which I probably would throw him in my lineup. He's a good wide receiver with boom potential.
And they're going to definitely look towards him more than anybody else.
They're going to be down. They're not going to run the ball, so sit Michael Carter.
Moving on to Dolphins versus Bills.
Start on the Dolphins side of the ball. On offense, this is very strong defense with the Bills, but you do have guys like Myles Gaskin that I'm sitting because this is going to be a game that they're down. They don't even look towards Gaskin away a lot.
Even though this is a very difficult matchup, I'm going to definitely start Mike Gesicki.
100%. Like you said, tight ends are very weak. Gesicki's coming off of 2 great games, one over 100 yards, the other one with 80 and a touch. If you're not plugging him into your lineup, you must have a much better tight end than him.
Yep.
And I assume you don't.
Moving into the Bills game, we have pretty much the same thing. Start everyone. You start Zach Moss, you start Josh Allen, you start Stephon Diggs.
You start Singletary?
I do not. I start Cole Beasley, though.
Game back. Yeah.
I start Cole Beasley. I think Cole Beasley has been sneaky good. He's sneaky athletic.
Sneaky athletic, that's what they love to say.
No, I think he is. I think he is good though, and I think he's definitely someone that you could plug into your lineup if needed. I'm not going to start Singletary as he has been horrible.
I will say, you're obviously starting Diggs. Sometimes there's guys who love to make crazy fantasy plays.
Too much.
Even though Dolphins defense is pretty atrocious, let's not forget they have Byron Jones and Xavier Rhodes.
Right.
Those are 2 lockdown corners plus 85 overalls on Madden. But they're going to lock down their guys, and Diggs might be a guy who gets attention taken away. You're going to be hoping for a touchdown because he only had the one big play 2 weeks ago. I think you're going to be looking towards Emmanuel Sanders being the top fantasy player.
Moving on to the Eagles and Lions game, we're going to start off the Eagles side of the ball. You have a questionable Miles Sanders, who I think if he plays, I think he's going to start breaking out for the rest of the year. I think he's going to be very good. You're going to want to pretty much start everyone on this Eagles offense because obviously the Lions are terrible.
Obviously,
Dallas Goedert, I think, is another person that you want to start.
That's a great play. Devontae Smith.
The Lions, the people you would obviously say start is Hawkinson and Swift, but they're both have been downgraded to questionable for next week.
I can't remember his first name, but I know Raymond on the Lions just had a 114-yard performance. This is going up against not a phenomenal secondary, so he could definitely be a guy who goes out and balls out.
I definitely agree. I think But overall, with this game, you're looking towards the obvious players more than the sneaky guys. I think the sneaky guys you're going to want to stay away from.
I agree.
Next, we got Panthers and Falcons.
Last week in both of our fantasy games, Panthers offense kind of killed us because Giants defense finally came to play against an offense that has overachieved. However, I do think they're still going to overachieve this week. I think DJ Moore is a no-brainer. But Chuba Hubbard, I'm plugging him into my lineup. He came off of a disappointing week. I think he's going to bounce back in his last week before Christian McCaffrey comes back to show that he can still take away some of the carries. Other than that, though, I'm not looking towards Robbie Anderson.
I agree.
It's going to be hard to start Darnold after that pretty pathetic performance he had.
I agree. I think
Chuba's my only lock. And DJ, obviously.
I think I agree with that take, actually. And then moving to the Falcons, you got Calvin Ridley, who finally got a touchdown. He's looking a little bit better.
6 yards, right?
I think so, but at least he got a touchdown. That offense has looked so horrid. So in my opinion,
what did Cordero do last week? Because I know you were watching that game.
He got a 3-yard touchdown, and that's pretty much it. I think he had like 40 yards in the touchdown. So you're going to still start Cordero. You're going to sit Mike Davis. You're going to sit everybody but Calvin Ridley on that team and Cordero. And I think that's pretty much it.
I think, like we keep saying, deeper league, consider Russell Gage. He's a guy who can definitely chalk up the big yards.
Oh, sorry, we didn't even mention Kyle Pitts. Is going to have a great game, I think.
Most touchdowns, or most yards, I think, in history.
He had 163
for 7
yards.
games by rookie.
163 yards last week. Moving on to this game, the next game, Rams-Texans, which on the Rams side of the game, on the ball, Darrell Henderson is going to put up a top 5 running back week, in my opinion. Stafford, start him. Cooper Kupp, obviously. Robert Woods, start him.
Do you start Van Jefferson?
I do start Van Jefferson as a flex if you need it. I start potentially Tyler Higbee if you need it. You start, if you have Rams defense, they're going to be the best.
They're going to go insane. And if you look at the opposite side of the ball, I'm sitting Brandon Cooks.
I'm sitting almost everybody.
I'm sitting absolutely everybody.
I'm sitting everybody,
There's not one start on this team.
I agree.
Pathetic franchise.
Yep.
Thanks to Bill O'Brien thinking after DeAndre Hopkins' best season, he's worth a second-round pick.
Moving on to the Steelers-Browns game. This game, I think, obviously, you have your obvious guys for the Steelers. You have Najee. You have Najee's obviously a lock. Big Ben Stidham
is a lock.
Deontay's a lock. Now, what are your thoughts on Chase Claypool for this game?
Claypool's a big play guy. I mean, we saw what he could do in his rookie season. He's done it maybe once or twice this year. I'm going to sit him. I think Deontay Johnson and Najee are going to have the only viable starter games. Maybe you're going to look towards their tight ends, but
I agree. And moving on to the Browns, I think Dearness Johnson,
whoever's starting,
lock him in. Even if, well, obviously, Hunt got placed on IR, so he can't play. So if Chubb he's questionable right now. If he does play, I think they're going to ease him in. I still think you start both of those running backs.
What do
Jarvis
you think when
Landry,
it comes exactly?
I think you start him again. If he's also questionable, if he plays, Odell Beckham is also questionable. So
I'm going to sit Odell and I'm starting Landry. Odell just doesn't get the volume.
I 100% agree. I think that the Browns are going to only start the running backs and Jarvis Landry and David Njoku.
Yeah, definitely Njoku's been a pretty good fantasy tight end. Had a big performance 2 weeks ago. Going into the Titans-Colts, the last 1 o'clock game for the Sunday slate.
We're not even going to talk about Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is the best.
But one guy who people I've heard he's been dropped in some leagues. He just came off of his best performance. I'm going to say A.J. Brown is a top 3 wide receiver this week.
I'm going to
probably the worst secondary in the league.
I'm going to disagree. I think that I have 2 big beliefs with A.J. Brown this week. I think he's either going to get 2 touchdowns and 100 yards, or I think that Derrick Henry could just take over the games like he does. And that's really the reason why A.J. Brown, it has nothing to do with how good he is. A.J. Brown's, talent-wise, a top 10 receiver in the league.
I agree.
He's amazing.
Tannehill just doesn't get him the ball enough.
Because, I mean, it's kind of hard to look towards your wides when you have Derrick Henry rushing for 180 and 3 touchdowns. So I think they might. It depends on what kind of game that is.
I think it's going to be a competitive game. I don't think they're going to be fighting in the opposite direction.
See, I think it's going to be a blowout for the Titans. I think the Colts aren't. The Colts are they obviously have Jonathan Taylor, but
I think it's going to be close because it's a divisional game that the Colts know they need to win.
Another thing is the Titans are coming off a blowout against the Chiefs. I think they're 5-2. I think they're coming in hot. I think they're gonna just roll over them. But for the Colts side, obviously start Taylor.
I'm starting Pittman.
I'm starting Pittman, no doubt. Now, a touchdown almost machine for tight ends with how bad they've been. What do you think about Mo Cox?
I picked him up last year in fantasy because he did the same thing that he's done right now, which is have a couple good weeks in a row.
And it's not the yardages that's going to save you; it's the touchdowns.
It's the touchdowns. I'm not going to start him if I have a top 15 tight end.
Okay.
But if I'm looking towards, do I really want to start, one of these guys who's not been performing lately, then I'm going to start Mo Cox because even if he's touchdown dependent, he has been at least getting in the end zone.
And in the last 4 weeks, he's gotten 4 touchdowns.
So I think you got to lock him in.
I agree.
Moving on to the 4 o'clock games, we have Seahawks, Jaguars. Jaguars side of the ball, you noticed that Robinson, and I'm starting Trevor Lawrence. If you don't have, we know our obvious starts for quarterbacks.
I think if you need to, you're going to start him, but that's not someone that I'd look to start. I don't love...
If your backup is... Who's a good example? Someone in our league is Baker. If it's a Baker-level quarterback, I'm starting Lawrence.
In my opinion, I'm starting Taylor Heinicke over...
Yeah, probably. Heinicke's pretty good fantasy-wise.
I think that's pretty much it. Going to the Seahawks, you have Alex Collins. You have also Rashad Penny, though.
I think after tonight, this is Monday night, if Alex Collins produces fairly well, I'm going to be starting him again with Chris Carson on IR. But if we see Rashad Penny take about 50% of his carries and do well, you want to see if he does well because he's going to get carries. But if he does well, I'm going to sit Alex Collins.
So one thing about Alex Collins, though, is he is questionable tonight, so he's probably not going to play a lot of snaps if he does. So I think it's going to be tough to judge. But either way, I'd start one of the running backs. DK, obviously, Lockett.
I was just about to ask you. Lockett has been also one of the more disappointing guys since the first 2 weeks.
I think Lockett's either going to keep doing this or he's going to have his break soon.
And this is going to be
he's going to be a high risk, high reward.
I'm starting him because of the high reward, even though it's not Russ throwing to him.
Because worst comes to worst, you start him at a flex option.
Exactly. Moving on, Patriots, Chargers, very intriguing. Let's just get Chargers out of the way. Start everyone.
Yep.
Because it's Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, and Herbert. Now, if you look towards
and
the opposite side of the ball, exactly, you're going to have Hunter Henry, plug him in your lineup. He's done very well lately.
David Harris, in.
Plugging him in. Are you starting Jacoby Myers?
No.
Probably the greatest receiver of all time who's never gotten a touchdown.
Yep. No, I'm not going to start Jacoby Myers. I think the Chargers defense is really good, and they don't have a ton of wide receivers. I think they're going to really key in on him and Bourne.
Do you start Jonnu?
Yes.
I agree. I think it's going to be a game where Mac Jones is going to look downfield now. A little bit of sneaky guys here. What about Kendrick Bourne? Because they're going to throw the ball. No, regardless of the secondary, I'm starting Bourne or Myers, and I think that's going to come down to
What about Bolden? Because last week you see him do a lot, and people saying it's also because of the blowout, but he is their pass-catching back.
He is. I'm just wary of those guys. Just like I was wary a few years ago. I'm not comparing Brandon Bolden to Austin Eckler, but Eckler was kind of in that role behind Melvin Gordon, where, whoa, this backup running back just dropped 20 points, so I'm going to start him and pick him up. Then he drops 2. It's very hard to do.
I think what I'm comparing him to
5 weeks in injuries, play him.
Is in 2016, the Patriots and Rex Burkhead. He was running behind James White.
Yeah.
And I think that's what he's going to be because Rex Burkhead was a very pass-catching back. So I think that's what you're going to look towards with him. So I'd say probably sit him, though. Buccaneers, Saints.
Buccaneers offense.
Start everybody.
Yeah, you're starting everybody. Fournette has been an absolute stud.
You're literally starting everybody.
Yeah. Except Ronald Jones.
Yes.
When it comes to the Saints, we know Kamara. Is Michael Thomas eligible? Or is it still going to be a few weeks?
I think he might be eligible, but regardless, sit him, in my opinion.
Agree. Now, what about, when you look at their offensive weapons, you're kind of just looking at Callaway against the...
And Harris, though, because he's been their deep threat.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
He is out this week, so we're going to have to see if
I'm going to start Callaway. It's the worst secondary in the league.
I agree. Start him.
I agree. Kamara's probably going to drop 50 in this game. I honestly think he's going to drop out 40.
Maybe in what game?
In the Buccaneers-Saints game.
I think if he would have to do it in pass catching, but I think he can.
I agree. It's just Buccaneers score so much, and it doesn't matter if you're down. Kamara's going to be involved.
You got Washington versus Broncos. I say for Washington, if you're in a little bit of a rut, I'd start Heineke. I'm starting Gibson. I'm starting McLaurin, and that's it.
I agree. Flip side of the ball.
I'm starting Sutton, and that's it.
You're not starting Javonte, and you're not starting Gordon.
I'm not.
I'm going to start Javonte.
I think the thing that scares me is, sure, last week they did both do good, but you never know which one it's going to be, because that Javonte touchdown that he got, that was in the last 2 minutes. If they give that to Melvin Gordon, Javonte gets 2 points. So I think you're going to want to stay away from Javonte.
I'm just going to be banking on a big game. Once again, we started to enter that bye week phase, that injury phase, so if you're in that situation, I'm starting him.
I agree.
With the last game on the Sunday slate, Cowboys-Vikings. Cowboys, you're pretty much starting everybody. You're starting Dalton Schultz.
I agree. You're starting everybody.
Coop. You're starting Pollard?
Yes.
Now we look at the Vikings side of the ball.
You start
kind of the same thing.
You start Thielen, you start Jefferson, obviously you start Cook, do you start guys like KJ Osborne? Do you start guys like
Kirk Cousins?
Do you start their tight ends?
I'm not going to start KJ Osborne. I am going to start Kirk Cousins. Once again, look at your quarterback and make this decision. Vikings are a very explosive offense. JJ's great, Thielen's great, and Kirk is that guy to go out and get 35 points, and I think he's going to have a great game.
I agree. Moving on to the last game, baby.
The New York Football Giants coming off of a blowout game over the Carolina Panthers at 2-5 versus a possibly Pat Mahomes-less Chiefs offense. Start with the Giants. Go ahead.
If Kadarius Toney plays, you're starting him.
You're starting him no matter who your wide receivers are. He's such a stud.
You're starting Danny? Probably not. For me.
You're not starting Danny.
Probably not.
I am going to be starting Danny.
You're starting Booker?
Because I think the Chiefs might just be the worst defense in the league. So I'm going to be plugging Danny into your lineups, looking at your quarterbacks wise.
I think I'm going to start Booker, and that's it. I'm not going to start Shepard.
I am going to start Shepard, Toney, Danny, and Booker. I just think the Chiefs' offense or defense is so bad. I don't think Spagnuolo is going to be able to get it together for them. I think if the Chiefs win this game, which they probably will, I'm saying without Mahomes, even they probably will because you have Tyreek Hill. I still think Giants are going to score a lot of points.
I think it's going to be difficult for them too, because even when they're in the red zone, when they do score points, it's still normally running.
That's true.
So, and then going to the Chiefs side, you have your obvious. You start Tyreek, you start Kelsey, you start Darrell Williams.
Do you start Mecole Hardman?
No.
I agree. I think, you're just especially...
Well, let me rephrase that, actually. If you're in a situation where you're comfortable with your game, maybe you do start Mecole to see if he can get his boom game, or someone like Byron Pringle.
Yeah, Pringle's been a guy who's gone out and gotten some good points. So that's going to wrap up our fantasy podcast. We are going to be getting back into the routine of hopefully at least 2 podcasts a week. It is, for the main part, going to be me and Jaden. Hopefully we're going to be still getting on Dylan and Anthony on the podcast more. But we're really excited about where we're going, and we definitely think
Ian Anderson,
the guy who is on our podcast, is going to lead the Braves.
All right, so for now, this is Ben.
Final score.